Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd. And today we are here for our, what month is it? November virtual user group meeting that we did January. You just looked at me like I was nuts. I guess I am nuts. We're here for our January. I was just testing everybody. We're here for our January 2011. I'm so worried about getting 2010 wrong or 2011 wrong that I decided to say January or November instead of January. Let's start over. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and we are here today for our January 2011 Tabs3 PracticeMaster virtual user group meeting, which we affectionately call the Watercooler. And today we are continuing in our exploration of version 16. Now, before I get too much into that, I am going to pull this up and tell you that if you are new, and even if you're not, you may want to know a couple things. You have a little box that looks kind of like this over to the right side of your screen, and jutting off to the left of it is another little box with some icons in it. At the top, we have an icon that looks like arrows pointing to the right. If you click that icon that looks like arrows pointing to the right, it will compress this big box and slide this one over and get the big box out of the way. So if you cannot see all of my screen, and it is because that big box is covering it up, use the little arrow to the right icon and get rid of it. When you do that, this will turn into an icon that looks like arrows pointing to the left, and clicking it again will cause this box to come back out. Now also, on this same little set of buttons, you have something that looks like a hand with an arrow pointing up in front of it. That's raising your hand. If you're feeling like you want to talk and ask a question, you can raise your hand and we will hopefully notice you, unmute you, let you ask your question, answer it, make sure we got it answered correctly, and then we will mute you again so that you can continue to eat potato chips or Fritos. If instead you are feeling a little bit shy, you can use this button to bring this box back into focus, and you can type a question right here under the question heading by going ahead and typing a question right into that. We will see that, and we will answer your question. If you have follow-up questions, just keep typing them until we get everything answered, and we'll use that to get all your questions answered. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mary Jo. I will tell you that today we are going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about workflows, and I won't go into any more detail. I will talk about them, and Mary Jo is going to talk about the new Invoice Entry Screen in Accounts Payable. So Mary Jo, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to show you our new redesigned Accounts Payable screen, and I'm going to get over there real quick. And for those of you who like to see the Accounts Payable screen when you're writing out your checks looking actually like a check, you're going to be very happy because they've redesigned it. When I click on my Invoice Manuals checkbox now, you'll see up at the top where my vendor is, it looks like a little check. And this does use a different check format. So if you have checks that you have now from Nelco or wherever you've ordered them from and you're using them, you can use those up, and then you can purchase new format checks, so the memo line will print on the check, and it will use this new format. You can tell it what check number to start with, and I'll show you where to do that in just a moment. But just for your reference, it does use a different design. But you're going to enter your vendor just like you normally would. You can put your memo in. Your reference will just come up like it always did, invoice number, and the invoice amount. And this is all what your check will look like. You've still got your description box down here. So I can come in and just go ahead and put in whatever description you're used to seeing over in your GL. And the rest of these boxes, you can see they're just redesigned. They're all still here. You still can put everything in there like you did before, but it's just a little bit easier format to follow. The other thing I want to show you up here at the top, before we just had a little check, and some of our customers didn't know that if you click on that check, it's just a quick print. You can quickly print the check right from this window. You don't have to go out and go to print checks. So they've kind of made it a little easier to know what that little check is or that little button by putting the quick print writing there. And then next to that, we've also got the Tabs 3 costs window. You could get to the cost window after you save this. You know, it automatically pops the box to let you go ahead and assign that particular invoice to a client in Tabs 3 and go ahead and bill them for that cost. And maybe sometimes you've done that where you have put in part of the cost. Maybe you had to split between 2 or 3 clients and you've closed that window and then you can't get back into it to add the remainder of the invoice to other clients. Well, now there's a little button here that will take you right to that cost window, so you can go ahead and continue reapplying that that amount to the client's invoice. So that's the new design screen. I'm going to take you out to show you on the print setup. If you go to your setup tab and you go ahead down to your print setup and go into check setup, this is where you can actually, bank account setup. If you go into setup on bank account, you'll see this is where you could use to be able to put in your last check number. Well, now down here at the bottom, you'll see that you can check which type of check layout you're using. So if you're still using the original check layout from Nelco, you can check that box. If you're ready to start with the new check layout, you can say, okay, I'm ready for the 1445. You can check that box. Let me get a bank account number in there. I can check that box and say automatically switch to the new layout 1572 on a particular check number. So when I automatically want to switch, I can say, well, my old checks are running out on check number 1000. My new checks are starting with 1001. And then it will go ahead and let you finish using up those old checks. And then you can switch to the new format. So you don't have to waste those check numbers. Okay? I'm going to change it back here. And we should be all set. Are there any questions on the new check layout? It's pretty straightforward, but
I do see one person with a hand raised. So it's Ruby. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Ruby. Ruby, what is your question?
Well, so pretty much what you're saying is if I have 2 accounts, and this is the problem we had earlier in the year when we went from one bank to the next. So, and we wasted tons and tons of checks because we ended up with new account numbers, or I'm sorry, new check numbers. So if I can go in and just say I wanted to stop at number 10 for my old bank, and my new bank doesn't start until 50, I can actually put in what check number I want for the new bank.
Well, let me think about this for a second. This feature actually is when you switch from one checkout layout to another.
Okay.
Not when you switch from one bank to another. However,
I was just wondering if they were interchangeable.
Well, I'm trying to think of if there's a way to use this to suit that purpose. So you switched from one bank to another, and you wanted to use up the old. I guess I'm not quite following. You wanted to use up the old checks?
Well, we wanted to use up the old checks, but unfortunately our new bank said, hey, no, we're going to start you off here. And we were like, okay, but we didn't realize how many checks we wasted. So, and after that, it was, really too late. So, but I was just curious if it was interchangeable. Yeah.
No, this is really just because when you are let me get back to where we were. When you are using that new check layout, it has a place for the memo line to appear on the check. If you look at your old checks, they don't have a place for the memo line to appear.
Right.
And so therefore, if you were to switch to the, if you wanted to continue to try and use up your old checks, you'd have to wait to switch the printer.
Okay.
And you'd have to know exactly when to do that, and you'd have to do it at exactly the right time. This merely allows you to say, as soon as you start with this check, that's when we switch to the new checks we ordered with the new layout, so that's when you can start printing the memo line. I can't think of any way that would actually solve your problem, but as you asked it, I was thinking, well, maybe there is a way, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
No,
if
no,
I
that's
change
fine.
my mind, if we come up with anything else, Ruby, I'll let you know what the solution is, but it doesn't sound like that would solve that problem. Okay, and let me look real quick and see if anybody else has a question. Nancy has a question, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Nancy, go ahead and ask your question. Nancy, are you there?
Yes.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. That name of that check, the kind of checks that you're talking about, change from this to this. We get our checks from Deluxe, so can that apply here?
That's a good question. Deluxe, as some of you will know, Deluxe used to be the quote-unquote approved check printer for software technology, and they switched about a year, maybe 2 years ago, to Nelco up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Deluxe, many people, like Nancy and a lot of other people, are still getting their checks from Deluxe, and Deluxe still prints checks that work fine with our software. I have not personally asked anyone at Deluxe or anyone that's dealing with Deluxe, but I would be surprised if Deluxe did not have also a check that suits this other purpose. So what I'll do, Nancy, I'm going to make a note of that. And let's see, Nancy, Deluxe, new format. I'm going to get an answer to that, and then when I send the email out, as many of you know, when you attend these, you get an email later with the link to the recording. When I send that email out that links you to the recorded version of this webinar, I will include information in that email on what I find about Deluxe supporting the new check format.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and mute Nancy. Okay, you're muted, Nancy. You can now eat your Fritos. And I don't think, Mary Jo, I miss. Oh, here's a question. Well, that was from Nancy, too. I bet she typed it. Let's go look. Come from Deluxe. Can I still continue to use them? Yes. Okay. I think that's it.
Just got one from Sharon.
Oh, got one from Sharon. Thank you.
Nope, got it. Okay.
Sharon says, thank you for finding about the Deluxe issues, so Sharon must be using those too. Yeah, I know we have a lot of people that had established relationships with Deluxe and really liked Deluxe, and when an STI changed, some people were a little upset, but I think that Deluxe has been very good about continuing to support those formats, so I would be surprised if they don't already know about the new format and haven't already made plans to also support them. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to add, Mary Jo?
There was one more question about Intuit checks. And again, I'm not sure that Intuit checks are approved to use with Tabs. If you're using those and they're working now, you may just have to get a different format there as well.
Was that from Dolores?
No.
Dolores emailed me moments ago about using Intuit checks for trust accounting. It's a coincidence. Okay. Okay. Well, that is the checks. I will say that I have been using this. I like it a lot. I will add one thing that Mary Jo probably hasn't learned yet because she hasn't been using it and hasn't been training it because version 16 isn't really out yet. That is that if you have a description down here that is carrying over from the last check and you go and type something under memo, the description will stay at what the last check was. And if you want the description to be the same as the memo, you hit F2 and it'll put that description in. So you do have the ability to copy that text down without having to. And I will say that the first 10 checks I wrote for the miscellaneous vendor for my times on the road where I'm getting meals and paying for parking and things, they all came out saying hotel because I forgot to do that. So that's something that'll catch you. I'll also point out that the memo appears on the check and the description still appears on the stub. Okay, so that's an important distinction. The description has always appeared on the stub. The problem that many people have had is there's never been anything that appears on the check. And sometimes you don't send the stub along with the check, and that's what this memo line is designed to solve. We'll go ahead and get out of here. And Mary Jo says there's one more hand raised. Who is it? Okay, you want to go ahead and unmute him? Tom, are you there? Is he unable to be unmuted? Maybe you're not an organizer. Let's look here. Hold on one second, everybody. It looks like go check Perpetua's question. She's asked a question since then. There's Tom. Tom, are you there?
Yes.
What's your question?
Oh, I didn't have a question. I was just listening.
You just wanted to raise your hand. You were stretching?
Apparently so.
You got to be careful. You could have just bought something if we were at an auction.
Right. Don't scratch your head, right?
There you go. Exactly. Okay, we'll put his hand down, and we'll go ahead and mute you, Tom. You're muted now. You can go on and eat your potato chips. What did Perpetua have a question?
Yeah, we've got have the number of characters in the description line.
No, I can tell you that right now. Oh, Mary Jo was muted when she read the question. Have the number of characters in the description line increased? No, unfortunately not. That has not changed. Although this is a good time to mention something that I usually try to mention every meeting. Perpetua, if you would, and if anybody else would like to see this change, would send an email to wishlist@tabs3.com, wishlist@tabs and then the number 3.com. That's where you vote for things that you think need to be improved or need to change for whatever reason. And we ask people to go one step further and make us, paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com, paul.purdue like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. If you will carbon copy or blind carbon copy me, we will submit the same request from our email address to Wishlist, and it's almost more than doubles the effect, because here you've got one of STI's largest resellers in the world. Actually, last year we were their largest seller of Tabs3. We were the #1 seller of Tabs3. And an important customer, both requesting the same thing. So Perpetua, if you would do that, send that email to wishlist@tabs3.com and carbon copy paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. Then I will wish for the same thing. And anybody else out there that feels we should have more characters in the description field in an AP check, do the same thing, because the more votes, the more likely that feature is to be added or that enhancement or change is to be made. Okay? Is that it, Mary Jo? Any more questions or hands?
That's it, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about workflows. We're not allowed to call them triggers, but that's what they are. We're not allowed to call them triggers because that's what Time Matters calls them. And so there's actually a triggers jar at Software Technology in Lincoln, Nebraska, and when somebody calls them triggers, they have to put $1 in the jar. I don't work at Software Technology, so I'm allowed to call them triggers. And the reason I want you to know that they're not allowed to call them triggers is because that's really what they are. A workflow is a way to trigger something happening when something else happens. Okay. Now, workflows are a PracticeMaster feature, so I'm going to go ahead and close up Accounts Payable. And I'm going to go into PracticeMaster, and I am going to get to a client screen. Gosh, I wonder who we got up here. Nice and Steffi. The Nice Law Firm. Okay, we'll actually pull up Needman, because I know nobody from Needleman is on the phone because they're not really clients. And I will point you over in this direction to workflows. Now, manage workflows is where I'm going to start out. And there are a couple workflows that are kind of built into the system. They have one to schedule an initial case assessment. So I'm going to go into that and I'm going to edit it. And the very first thing I'm going to show you is that if it's inactive, it doesn't show up here. So I'm going to inactivate or reactivate it, if you will, and save it. And close this up. We are running a beta version of version 16, and I don't know if this is a flaw or if I'm not understanding something correctly. My assumption was that that would cause this to show up over here. It didn't. So I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen, and I'm going to go on, something I learned long ago. Now that this is active, even though it doesn't show up here, that means that it can be run. And there we go. It's not user activated, and that's why it doesn't show up over here. So I'll explain that in a second. What this says is that based on the file client, for all records, when the field agree date changes from being blank to having anything else, that we want to do something. And what do we want to do? We want to create a new record in the calendar file, and that new record should have the calendar code CM. It should be for this client. It should be initial case assessment meeting. It should automatically assign itself to this client. And I think that's it. Now, what that means, we're going to back out of here real quick. We're going to go to this client. We're going to realize that we do not have in my system the field agree date. So we're going to very quickly go into the form designer and add it. This is a little extra bit of information that you're getting, is how to get into the form designer and how flexible PracticeMaster is. A lot of you already know this. We're going to very quickly add this field called agree date. And perhaps saying very quickly was not the best way to approach that, but there it is. We're going to unbundle the stuff. I'm just going to change this to agreement so that it fits. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to not move alpha score. Okay, good enough for now. I'm going to go ahead and run this form. Okay, you don't have to do that to run the workflow. We'll go back here. Now, we'll unpin our quick clicks. And here we have agreement. This is the agree date field. Now remember what the workflow said. The workflow said that any time the agree date or date of fee agreement, I shortened the label just so it would fit and then didn't move it over all the way, but nonetheless, whenever this field changes from having nothing in it, or in other words from being MMDDYYYY to anything else, it's going to automatically pop up a calendar window and schedule a certain number of days from today for the initial assessment meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to today. I'm going to save, and when I do, it asks, do you want to run that workflow? And I say yes. It pulls up a calendar entry. It shows me the fields that it has automatically filled in for me. This is 5 weeks from today, I believe. This is the calendar code. This is the description. It's an event. We don't have an actual time yet, and we may change the date. It's being tied to this particular client, and it's for me, and the reason it defaulted to me is because I'm the person who's running the workflow. Okay? That is a workflow. Now, you'll notice it didn't just schedule this. I got to get the guy on the phone. I got to find out that 2 o'clock is what works for him, and then put in 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock here. I may want to change it from Monday 2/7/11 to something different. I may also want to include Mary Jo. I may also want to turn on the alarm and make it 30 days or 30 minutes before the meeting. Now, all of these things could have been automatically programmed or not. But the point is, workflows can be triggered from something else happening. When you put in the statute of limitations date, you can automatically trigger something that generates 25 different reminders in the task list that the statute is coming up on this case. When somebody enters a date closed and checks off the inactive switch, you can automatically send an email to the primary timekeeper in the case. If somebody mistakenly puts in a time entry that's greater than 10 hours, it's probably wrong. If they put in 11 hours, they probably meant to put in 1, or maybe 1.1. You can automatically send an email. You can automatically prompt them and warn them, or you can automatically send an e-note to the administrator that says, hey, look at this billing entry, it's probably wrong. When something happens, something else can be triggered. Very, very cool, far-reaching in implication. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go back into here to workflows, and I'm going to show you just a couple things about how this works. There can also be user-activated workflows, so that instead of when a certain thing happens, the user-activated workflows merely show up down here, and they don't really have conditions up here. They can, but they also can be activated specifically by the user. So in other words, you can say, we want this to happen when a record's added or changed or deleted, or it can simply be user-activated. And if we were to uncheck these other two things, and it's merely user-activated, then that's something that only shows up over here and can't be triggered by something else. You can also say when a record's added or when a record's changed or deleted, we want to look at these fields and see if they meet this criteria, and if they do, we want to do a certain thing. And the thing that we want to do is what appears down here. And you can have more than one thing that happens. When that agree date gets filled in, you might want to A, generate a letter to the client thanking them for signing their fee agreement, B, schedule this initial assessment meeting that I think we just looked at, C, assign it to a primary timekeeper, D, E, F, G, H, anything. And these things happen immediately, as many as you want, happen immediately upon this condition. Okay? They can be made inactive, which means that they aren't currently running. Maybe they got turned off because you stopped doing a certain thing, but you don't want to delete the workflow because you may go back to doing it that way. You can prompt before running. I don't know if you remember, but when I went ahead and changed that agree date, it then said, hey, do you want to run this workflow? Well, maybe you don't want to ask them. Maybe you just, every time you change the agree date, you want to run that workflow, and it's just something that happens. They can be applied to all records or a certain type of records. Maybe it's only the people in Lucas County that we want to do this for. So yes, when the agree date changes from nothing to something, but only for the filtered records based on a filter. And I'd have to have already developed a filter, but I could have a filter that says only records within Lucas County. So maybe in Lucas County, when we set a statute of limitations date, we have a certain thing that we also have to do that you don't have to do in Monroe County or Mahoning County or whatever county. So a lot of power here. You have the ability to trigger all sorts of different things happening based on all sorts of different criteria. I'm going to go into new real quick just so you can see the things that you can currently trigger in the initial release of version 16. You can create a new record in any of the files. So when we do this in the client file, we want to create a journal record or a calendar record or a fee record or a cost record or whatever record. You can change a record. When we do this to the client record for the corresponding client entry, also in the client file, we want to also change this, 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 and this. So when this field changes, it automatically, based on what that field changes to, could do this or this or this or this in another field. We want to process a calendar plan template. Now, in my example that we started with, we created a calendar record. That was create a new record for the calendar file. Process a calendar plan template, you may remember I said if you put in a statute date in a special field to hold the statute date for the client, it can automatically generate 25 reminders. That would be a calendar plan based on statute date. Start document assembly. I said in one example, I said when this happens, you may want to write a letter to the client thanking them for signing and submitting their fee agreement. You might want to start an email or start or send an e-note. More on start or send on that in a second. I'm going to go on with my list. So you can email somebody, or you can e-note internally if you happen to have what they're going to be calling the Platinum version, what they currently call the CSV version, client server version. You can also send an e-note. That's an instant messaging sort of thing that we have built into the client server version. You can display a message. In my example, if somebody entered a fee entry with hours of greater than 10, you might just pop up a message that says, hey, are you sure you want to enter this with hours greater than 10? Because that's probably a mistake. Run a report, write a report, launch a PracticeMaster program. You can start a certain program within PracticeMaster, the journal screen, the calendar, the the monthly calendar. You can start any of the programs within PracticeMaster, or you can launch an outside program. So anything that can be addressed in Windows as a program can be launched from within PracticeMaster based on certain things happening. Okay.
Paul, I'm going to stop you because you got two questions
Okay.
here. One, somebody wants to know if the workflows are available in PracticeMaster Basic or just
Good,
Premier.
very good question. Workflows are a Premier feature. However, and I'm glad that question got asked, because when version 16 is released, the price will go up for users in both Basic and Premier. So if you have Basic right now and you want this workflow feature, upgrade now, because the difference in cost will be just slightly higher to upgrade after version 16's release. So that's a very good question, not only from the does it work in Basic, which was the original question, but helped me to remember that the price is going up on PracticeMaster. I will add to my note that I made for Nancy, where I'm going to tell everybody the result of finding out the new format support for deluxe checks. I will also let everybody know the new pricing for PracticeMaster Premier and PracticeMaster Basic in the email that we send out to attendees of the virtual user group meeting.
Okay, Paul, the other question is, can you select more than one option here on this workflow? Can you create a new record, change a record? Can you create more than one option?
Yes. Not here, but back here you can add as many new things as possible as you want. So if you wanted to change a record, change, let's say, a field within the client record, and create a new calendar record, and do an email to the primary attorney, and start document assembly for the letter thanking the client, you would simply create 4 new actions, giving each one the appropriate step. Okay. Any more questions, Mary Jo?
Nope, that's it.
That's a lot to think about, and I certainly don't expect anybody to remember how workflows work. But I think what you need to start thinking about is what you can do with them. It's time to start looking at taking PracticeMaster, if you're using it now, a step further with what's coming out in version 16, and workflows is definitely a very powerful tool to make that happen. I will tell you that when this was introduced to the resellers last year, we've been playing with version 16 almost for a year, and we saw it for the first time, well, actually about 11 months ago. There were a lot of Time Matters people there, because Time Matters has restructured how they deal with their resellers, and so there are a lot of upset Time Matters resellers that are switching over to selling PracticeMaster. And the Time Matters resellers that were there, remember I told you that's the package that has the triggers, or calls these same feature triggers. They were very impressed, because the triggers in Time Matters, although these do the same sort of thing, weren't nearly as sophisticated as what we've got here. And as most of you know, software technology tends to keep improving and keep improving. So if this is what they've done for a first step as far as workflows, I can't wait to see what they come out with in a couple months after the initial release. So any more questions, Mary Jo?
No more questions. Oh, wait. Let's sneak in here. Hold on just a minute.
It's not Bill asking if Farron Henley will be here, is it?
No. What other specific fields can trigger an action?
Oh, anything. Any field. That's a good question, because I kind of glossed over that. If you are working within a certain file, which we are, we're working on a workflow within the client file right there, you will be able to select any field to trigger an action. So for instance, if you want to know if they have changed task-based billing from being checked to being unchecked, there's an example of that right there. This says when the task-based billing field starts out checked and then changes to unchecked, we want to do something. Any fields. There is no restriction on which fields.
There's another question here. Any word on the release date for 16?
Oh, that's a good question. 16 was originally going to be out, gosh, I think before the end of the year. The forum, which is when all the dealers get together in Lincoln, Nebraska, is at the end of March. I expect it to have been released by then. I can't guarantee it, but I expect that it will be released either in the second half of February or sometime early in March. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to meet that deadline. They're very, very careful about testing. Right now, we are waiting on something called the Exchange connector, which we'll talk about at another virtual user group meeting. It's a very sophisticated way to hook Outlook into PracticeMaster for bilateral communication instantaneously and on the fly. And that hasn't even been released to one of my beta clients that's waiting for it. So there are certain things that they are putting finishing touches on. There's also a new feature that I won't tell you about right now that was added at the last minute. We found out about it about 3 weeks ago. We'll be showing you that maybe next month. It depends on when we get a release copy that's got it in it. So I would say definitely by the end of March, but very likely end of February, early March. Any more questions, Mary Jo?
That's all I have.
Okay, I'll shut up then. Join us next month. A word about timing. You'll notice today's Monday. We have some very religious attendees at our virtual user group meetings, and they are used to coming at 1 o'clock on the last Tuesday of the month. Today is the last Monday of the month. We have moved our virtual user group meetings to Monday, so from now on they will always be the last Monday of the month. For a couple months, if we happen to have a situation like we did this month where the last Tuesday would have been 1 week and the last Monday happens to be the week after, because today is also the last day of the month, we'll let you know. We'll kind of send you 2 reminders of the virtual user group meeting just to help the people that might be used to looking forward on Tuesday. But do mark your calendars or change your inner clocks. The virtual user group meeting will now be on Mondays instead of Tuesdays. Next month we will cover more in the new version 16. I know that we will probably talk about the new Matter Manager, which is that feature that I won't tell you any more about, but we'll probably talk about that because we'll probably have it. We'll probably go over some of the other features that have been added and enhanced. But until then, everybody have a good month. Everybody have a good rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks much. Bye-bye.